Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can you give everybody a couple minutes here to get situated? Because 8 a.m. I know is cruel and unusual, so we'll just wait a minute or two here and make sure everybody logs in.
Beth is the only other individual I know at 8 a.m. who always looks like she's like roaring and ready to go. Such a morning person.
I mean, my kid wakes us up at 5:30 in the morning, and I'm 2.5 hours in, still not ready for the day. So I don't know what that's.
So I have 4 children, and I think toddler time got me in that mode of up and out.
That's awesome. I've graduated to a rooster now that does that for me. My kids now just sleep until 11.
I got to sleep until 8 o'clock the other day, and it was like I was on vacation on a Hawaiian island. So
you get up and you check on them to make sure nothing's wrong when you get an extra hour, right?
Okay.
I can distinctly remember the day coming into work, and at the time it was the controller had said like, "Hey, you're pretty chipper." I'm like, "Oh my God, I got a solid 6 hours of rest last night, like straight, like they slept through." Good feeling.
Awesome. Now Bill and Beth and I look when we get up to see if our kids actually have come home for the night.
They came home the night before.
Please God, make sure they're in their
I
bed.
check out the sneakers in the garage on the way out the door. That's how I can know if they're all accounted for.
Yes, are the keys on the table. Did everybody arrive home safely last night? Yeah.
Hey, while I have a minute, I just want to introduce Olga Crombie. She has joined the localizing the carbon offsets crew, and this is our first meeting. So thank you for joining us at 8 a.m. She is from the Study Abroad office. So what you're in for right now, we're a combined carbon pricing and carbon offset, 2 committees in one right now. Student presentations. The students have been doing so much work over the past semester to kind of orient both of the committees and what they're doing. So you're in for a treat to just hear what they've discovered. So thank you for joining us, Olga.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody.
Morning. Welcome.
all right, I'm just trying to pre-assign some folks to rooms. So this morning, we're going to have 2 presentations from the 2 student teams that have been working with the working groups this semester. Ryan, I don't know if you want to do a brief overview, just because we have some new folks who might not know the different CAP working groups.
Sure, I can just do a very, very brief level set here. I think the first thing, I never want to speak on behalf of Bill and Beth, but I feel pretty confident about this one, which is just a lot of gratitude to Nick, to you, first and foremost, for all of your work here, but to all of the students who have put in so much time in this for this work and on these topics. And so I think we want you to know how appreciative we are, both we being the greater university, but we also being all the committee members and who are working to try to advance this work. So thank you. And thank you for not only the time you put in, but probably some maybe a little bit of blood, a lot of sweat, and hopefully no tears as we go through this. I think the other thing, just as a little bit of a level set for maybe a couple other folks who are on the call here, this is part of our larger climate action work, which involves 10 different initiatives, and there are 10 working groups advancing those initiatives. Some of those captains are on this call today. Beth Corey, our university controller, heads up our pricing carbon group. And of course, that's where 50% of the focus has been. And Bill McDonald heads up our offset, our localized offset group, and is championing that effort. So these 2 pieces are really instrumental and important initiatives of our CAP work. I see that Tonga Pham is on the call. So of course, they're only second to our heating and cooling initiative, which she chairs, of course. That's a joke. They're all equal, right? We all 10%. But all of these advancing together are really moving us down the road in terms of taking climate action and getting us towards neutrality. Nick, tell me if I'm going too far here, but I think the rough outline of our time here from Nick's email last night is that we will hear from the students, and we will hear kind of the totality, but broken into those two parts. And then we'll actually split apart for efficiency purposes, and the pricing carbon side of the equation will go to one breakout room. The offset groups will go to another for the dialogue. So if our colleagues on the committees could be thinking about those questions, jotting those down, points that they want to bring up, ask about, etc., that would be great. We'll do those after the two groups have done that. And then, Nick, will we come back together very briefly at the end? Or
Ryan, you're making this so easy for me, Ryan. Thank you. Yeah, we'll come back here for a couple minutes at the end just to touch base and to see everybody off. I imagine we'll probably wrap up around 9 o'clock, and I need to just talk to the students about the final reports and about the edits to those and about getting those back to you, you, Ryan, and you, Derek, for the university's use. So,
Great.
And so go ahead.
Nick, I was just going to add one last piece. I guess just to the students, maybe a message from all of us that are on the committees. So I know that you viewed this work as academic work and as part of your curriculum in this class, but I can guarantee you that this work will be leveraged to advance our greater pathway going forward. So after some of you may be graduating in the next few days here, but your work will live on in this. And so I think that's a really, really cool thing for us. I hope it's a cool thing for you. And it's really what we're really trying to bring some of our more experiential, to bring the impact into the real world. And while higher ed isn't always the real world, it's the real world for us. So again, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. That's a much better introduction than I ever could have given to this morning. So I appreciate you making my job easy this morning. So the first presentation that we're going to have is the Putting a Price on Pollution team. They're going to share a PowerPoint presentation and just walk through some of the things that they've worked on this semester, and also talking about some of their kind of final report, final ideas that they have about this. And then, as Ryan mentioned, we'll talk about those in greater detail in the breakout groups. After they present, the localized offsets team will present, and then, again, we'll kind of save the discussion for the breakout spaces. So just to preserve bandwidth, because we are going to try to record this, if you're not presenting, can everybody just kind of turn their camera off? And I will turn it over to the Putting a Price on Pollution team to go ahead and present.
Thank you, Dr. Akovich and Ryan, for the great intro. And good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Platt, and I'd like to thank you all for attending our final presentation culminating our research for the Put a Price on Pollution Committee, working towards UB's 10 and 10 Climate Action Plan to reach net zero emissions by 2030. Putting a price on pollution is one of the 10 initiatives, as Ryan said. And as a quick reminder, carbon pricing is a system that requires polluters to pay when they emit carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. And by phasing in carbon pricing at UB, it will make the university accountable operationally and financially for the adverse impact on the climate. We have condensed the findings of our research this semester into a 10-minute overview. And the full report will be available soon, as Nick alluded to. So we divided the analysis into 4 subteams to analyze 4 key topics that influence UB's pollution pricing strategy. And they are case studies, state and federal policies, university policies, and decision-making tools. You will hear from a representative from each subteam starting with case studies, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end of the offsets presentation. So as previously stated, my name is Chris Platt, and I will be the representative from the case studies team. So this chart summarizes our study of 5 mid to large size research institutes and 1 publicly traded company, revealing a few key findings in regards to their pollution pricing strategies. 4 out of 6 organizations implemented a carbon charge, an actual line item in the budget, or had one imposed on them. And the other 2 organizations implemented a proxy price, a decision-making tool with no real funds exchanged. Following examples from many peer organizations, UB should implement a broad scope carbon charge. We found this to be the most effective choice for large universities with many departments, schools, and decentralized decision-making. And the highest price per ton in our study was externally imposed in the case of the University of British Columbia. So an internally imposed carbon charge would best prepare UB for a future externally imposed charge by New York State and or the federal government. Other recommendations to prepare for paying for pollution include running a pilot program, as Yale did, to familiarize everyone with the system, working to reduce emissions prior to the price being implemented, to reduce the burden of that price, as Duke did. And now I'm going to pass it on to Sandra to discuss the impact of state and federal policies on pollution pricing strategies at UB. Sandra?
I am Sandra, and today I'll be sharing our key policies, their challenges, and our recommendations for the state and federal levels. So first, at the state level, in response to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, known as the CLCPA, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation created an establishing value on carbon guidance document, which said that state agencies should estimate their societal impact from greenhouse gas emissions or the social cost of carbon. There are many challenges with this, but the main challenge is that there's no single consensus on which discount rate to use. Furthermore, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA, in collaboration with Resources for the Future, have given agencies the flexibility to choose from a social cost of carbon or marginal abatement approach. This will allow companies to use an approach that doesn't hinder them financially. However, this creates a challenge where profits can be prioritized over emission reductions. The Climate and Community Investment Act, known as the CCIA, is still in legislation in the New York Senate and would effectively be a carbon border tax of $55 per ton on greenhouse gas emissions or co-pollutants. This would provide a revenue stream to help accomplish the goals of the CLCPA and DEC, and a challenge ensuring that these costs are not unjustly passed on to low-income communities. For our recommendations, New York's policies are complementary to UB's climate action plan, so even if UB doesn't take up certain climate mitigation efforts, UB may still be impacted by state policies. Second, at the federal level, President Biden has supported legislative action addressing the topic of climate mitigation, such as rejoining the Paris Agreement. Congress, on the other hand, isn't agreeing on how to put a federal price on carbon due to conflicting political opinions. This was the case with the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, or EICDA, which was proposed by Democrats, and then also the Baker-Schultz plan, which was proposed by Republicans. It is difficult to offer concrete solutions to federal policy given its sovereignty. However, UB should continue to use its high-ranking position as a public research institution to further engage in lobbying efforts with the government. Currently, these are our most important state and federal policies and our recommendations. I will now be sending you over to Marissa to discuss their university policies for the findings and challenges.
Thank you, Sandra. Hi, my name is Marissa. Today I'll be talking to you about the major findings, challenges, and recommendations we found that relate to university building units, fleet, and air travel policies. First, we found that when establishing building policies, it is best to provide annual energy reports online. Also, pilot programs conducted by Duke and other universities found that the most economically and carbon efficient way to meet energy needs is by expanding utility infrastructure. We also found that revenue collection is easier to manage than redistribution, so many universities apply a flat pollution price to all departments. Policy challenges for sustainable building guidelines are often not met due to the absence of frameworks and implementation strategy and management by a sustainable building coordinator. Also, carbon offsets allow for continued consumption of energy, so annual building efficiency projects are necessary to reduce the number of needed offsets. In regards to the university fleet, the major key findings we found were many universities replace their current vehicles and use alternative transportation incentives. Duke and ASU provide their employees and students subsidies to initiate various forms of alternate transportations like car and bike sharing. ASU offers free bike tune-ups and maintenance. We do recognize that UB already encourages car sharing with Zipcar. Fleet policy challenges are that fuel efficiency is a major challenge for vehicle replacement. High cost of fleet vehicle construction, purchase fees, maintenance, and repair fees, which will be a challenge in the later stages. In regards to air travel, we found that most universities have set a mandatory fee, with some universities having an increasing yearly flat rate. Duke introduced no air travel zones, which include eliminating flights within a certain radius around UB. The largest key finding is the potential to create university partnerships with airlines. Many airlines are now pledging carbon neutrality. Air travel policy challenges related to the proposed no air travel zones include faculty and students not having enough time to choose alternative forms of transportation. Also, flying may actually be more carbon friendly. Another challenge is if UB uses an optional offset fee, it will need to be monitored, unlike a mandatory fee. For our recommendations, we recommend that UB building policies require energy cap information to be posted publicly, coupled with the expansion of smart meters. Conduct a pilot program by unit and introducing a carbon charge based on building footprints. Online data on emissions conversations should be paired with annual building performance evaluations, and apply a flat pollution price of $40 based on the carbon ton of each individual building emissions. For the UB fleet, we recommend the development of a targeted marketing plan on the benefits of bike and car sharing, where UB can further expand their bike renting services. The fleet analysis indicates replacing most vehicles once the repair fee exceeds $2,000. So brief, cost-efficient analysis is important in vehicle replacements. Also, broadening the education on software tools such as telematics to monitor fleet performance. For UB air travel, we recommend setting a mandatory flat rate carbon offset fee. The biggest recommendations would be a formation of partnerships between UB and airlines, specifically airlines like Delta, JetBlue, and American Airlines. They seem to be the key leaders in airline sustainability currently. We have enjoyed being able to research these three key areas for university policies. Hope you find our recommendations helpful. I will now be turning it over to Rachel with the Decision-Making Tools team.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'll be talking about some of the tools that we looked at for the university to use. First, while we were conducting our research, we reached out to some colleges, including Smith and Vermont College. We did not hear back from Smith. However, we did hear back from Vermont, and they recommended using the A-Fleet tool. This stands for the Alternative Life Cycle Environmental and Economic Transportation Tool. This tool was developed by Oregon National Labs and enlisted by the Department of Energy's Technology Integration Program. This tool captures most variables in regard to assessing gasoline prices in relation to carbon pricing. We also looked at several life cycle calculators from Smith and Harvard, and these examine net present values and discount rates. This chart depicted right here encapsulates all of the variables that these tools account for. And in regard to gas pricing, we also looked at another tool, which is called the AVERT tool. It stands for Avoided Emissions Generation Tool, which can capture the national average of carbon emission rates. This calculation can help determine internal carbon pricing for the university, which will help guide its decision-making process in relation to carbon or climate change impacts, risks, and opportunities. And then for recommendations, we are recommending that the university make a concerted effort to collect the data that pertains to the input variables listed in that chart previously. Collecting this data will allow UB to utilize the tools that we've examined fully, and these have been shown to be successful for decision-making for other colleges such as Smith and Harvard. And if the university chooses to develop their own tool, it will require ample resources and collaboration with other entities such as NYSERDA and the DEC. We also reached out to them and we did not hear back from them as well. And then finally, I just want to say on behalf of all the sub-teams, thank you for allowing us to do this work. And we learned a great deal on how to coordinate efforts to write this report about carbon pricing. And we hope that this helps you achieve their goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. We will now leave it open to any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate the presentation by your team. I think that was very clear, and thanks for giving us the summary of those of what you did this semester. Before we turn it over to the localized offsets team, I just wanted to see if there were any kind of general questions that you had about the putting a price on pollution work that they did this semester. This is also a chance for the localized offset team to get queued up to get ready to present. So, were there any general questions?
Nick, do you want to keep these pretty high level? Because I know we're going to ask.
Yep.
So only the higher ones. Okay.
I just didn't know, especially for some of our newer guests and folks, if there was just any kind of general question that may have, doesn't seem like it, but I just always want to ask. Okay. So now we'll turn over to the next working group on localized offsets. Who's kicking off the presentation?
I will be.
Okay, thanks, Izzy.
Yep. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're the Investing Locally team, and we're going to be talking about carbon offsets. Okay, so in 2019, the University of Buffalo emitted approximately 86,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Despite emissions reductions, the only way to become carbon neutral is to generate carbon offsets. A carbon offset is a reduction of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases in order to compensate for emissions generated by the university that cannot be reduced otherwise. This can range from air travel to building emissions. Offsets are measured in tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and to generate an offset, 1,000 metric tons must be reduced. As per our committee, our goal is to reduce 15% of current net emissions, or 12,900 metric tons of carbon dioxide. The three areas our team has chosen to investigate are tree-based solutions, building-based solutions, and avoided conversion. These projects have viable case studies that our team has examined and found potential partnerships and grants in New York State to work with. Our goal is to sequester 10,000 tons with our tree planting and urban forestry initiative within the first 5 years. And for our building-based solution, which features weatherization of homes, which ranges from replacing insulation to installing heat pumps or light bulbs, our goal is to offset 1,450 metric tons of carbon over the course of 5 years. Finally, we have avoided conversion, which is the conservation of plots of land to keep natural habitats protected. And our goal is to offset 1,450 metric tons over the course of the first 5 years. Next, we'll be moving on to accreditation and verification. The next slide. Zach, can you go to the next one?
Yeah, I'm experiencing some technical difficulties. Hang on. There we go.
Okay, so according to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the CLCPA, they have mandated that carbon offsetting initiatives in New York State remain within a 25-mile radius of the university. And the map that we had demonstrates the projects that can take place within respect to north, south, and downtown campuses. And in order to be registered as a carbon offset, each project must be accredited and verified. And we have chosen a peer-reviewed process, which is second nature, a federal process, which is using the American Carbon Registry, improved forest management, and a state process, which is done by the New York State Department of Conservation. Each has its own unique benefit, which can be seen on our chart. Second nature offers the fastest process. The American Carbon Registry would allow for us to create a market for our offsets, allowing timber rights, and the New York State process would allow for a very precise tracking of the carbon. And next, we'll be giving a more in-depth analysis of our tree-based solutions, and we'll be hearing from Mitchell, so thank you.
Thank you, Izzy. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming this morning. My name is Mitchell DeBortley, and I'll be presenting to you guys on forestry and tree planting. Next slide, please. When it comes to offsetting unavoidable emissions such as plane travel, tree planting and forestry is the most effective option. If you look at our case studies, tree planting initiatives are the most common solution. 7 out of 10 offset programs at Duke are tree plantings, and Colgate is currently working on reforesting over 200 acres of farmland. This approach is used for many reasons, but most importantly because of how reliable they are. By using trees, we are doing more than just offsetting carbon emissions. We are taking the carbon and storing it in the biomass of the tree, which is key to reducing atmospheric carbon levels. We were tasked with finding offset solutions within 25 miles of campus, so large tree plantings and urban forestry were both explored as offset options. If the university wanted to offset and sequester the 10,000 metric tons that we had planned for this approach to carbon offsets, we would need anywhere from 950 acres to 4,000 acres of land, depending on the species and the upkeep of the tree. Beyond the offsets and sequestration, there are many other benefits that need to be considered. Something that can often go overlooked is the nature benefits beyond carbon. By planting these trees, we would be reintroducing habitats for countless native species, animals, and insects. In addition to this, many people support planting trees. It has a high community engagement. It adds a pleasing aesthetic, increases property value, and can help save heating and cooling, as well as reduce kilowatt hours. Tree plantings do not cost a large amount of money off the bat. The cost of tree planting goes toward the initial purchase of the tree and an arborist to look after it. Depending on which approach you take, it would cost about $10 to $20 per ton, but can cost up to $200 per ton if the land needs to be purchased. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Mel, who will be discussing weatherization.
Thank you, Mitchell. I'm going to give a brief overview of our otherwise known as weatherization. Next slide, please.
Mel, I'm having difficulty understanding you.
Do you hear me now? I mean, if anything, if you can't hear me, I will call on my phone and you guys can move forward.
I'm not sure if others are having difficulty or if it's just something on my end.
No, I think it's universal, Nick.
Yeah, definitely. We can hear you very distorted.
Maybe we can skip ahead and I'll try to call in from my phone.
That sounds good.
Okay, so I'll go next. Let me turn on my video. Hi, everyone. My name is Zachary Ashbrook. This morning, I will be talking about avoided conversion, also known as land protection or conservation. Okay, so avoided conversion was recently adopted by Duke University as a viable certified offset. In 2018, they added this option to their Duke Carbon Offset Initiative. With the assistance of a group of graduate students, much like ourselves, they were able to justify adding this aspect to their university effort to offset carbon by protecting forested land from conversion to other uses. Due to complex ecological makeup of an intact forest, more carbon can be stored throughout the forest. There's also a high carbon market value in protected land. Many private landowners look into entering the carbon market in order to make more money off of their land. The Land Trust Alliance, in partnership with Finite Carbon, is helping make the carbon market available and more accessible to private landowners. One really important co-benefit of avoided conversion is reduction of habitat fragmentation. The Western New York Land Conservancy has started an ambitious project to create the Western New York Wildway. Increased forested land protection due to a viable carbon offset market will be crucial to the success of this project. And I believe that the University of Buffalo can play a very large role in this ambitious project. And before I pass the mic to the next presenter, Mel, how are you doing on your end?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So if you can go back like 2 slides. Thank you. So I'm just going to start it off where I tried to start. So thank you, Mitchell. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to give a brief overview of our building-based solutions, otherwise known as weatherization. Next slide, please. From our research, we found 3 key takeaways: high community support, readily accessible grants, and it is cost-effective in the long term. The most relevant initiatives investigated were weatherization projects of socioeconomically disadvantaged communities. Most, if not all, case studies reflected community members that felt it was important to improve current renters' living conditions. Through the Finger Lakes Fund and NYSERDA/NYSEG, readily accessible grants are available to renters and landlords alike. This project is cost-effective in the long term as the startup costs are high, while the long-term costs are able to generate more benefits. Weatherization returns are $2.78 in non-energy benefits for every dollar invested in the program. The case studies evaluated were from Duke University, the University of Florida, and Furman University. The initiatives evaluated included small scale and larger scale projects, ranging from the distribution of energy efficient light bulbs to insulating homes. The matrix in our report provides a more detailed analysis of these programs, which speaks to potential costs, carbon reductions, energy savings, and utility bill reductions. Angelina will later discuss our community assets or community stakeholders, and I'll now pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you again.
Thank you, Melanie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Angelina White. Going into our conclusions, I'll be discussing community and university co-benefits, and then Izzy will close us out with discussing funding and final recommendations. So looking at community and university co-benefits, we identified multiple organizations within our 25-mile radius who we thought could be potential partners to the university in its carbon offsetting initiatives. From there, our database and mapping team designed a local asset map, which is on the screen to your right, and that shows us spatially where these organizations are located. These organizations specialize in land conservation, urban forestry, and weatherization in their everyday operations, so we can benefit from their expertise. Some of these organizations have had previous collaborations with UBs, and some of these organizations have worked with each other, so we feel confident that we can establish new partnerships with these organizations. We also looked at Arizona State University's best practices that they discovered through implementing their carbon offsetting program. They found that local support led to supplemental funding as well as in-kind support from multiple third-party organizations. They also found that the opportunity to work with the public provides additional intangible benefits such as sense of place and community engagement. We feel these best practices could absolutely apply to UB's carbon offsetting initiatives, and I will now pass it off to Izzy, who will discuss funding and final recommendations.
Okay, so we had 3 different initiatives for our funding. So our first recommendation would be a similar program to the University of Florida. Employees would have the option to donate $1 to $2 of their paycheck in order to offset their personal carbon footprint. This is a great way to get the staff involved and interested in our initiatives and get them trying to think about their own carbon offsetting. Our second option would be to have a special sustainability parking lot that students or staff can pay to use. We all know parking is difficult sometimes, so this would just be a private parking lot for them. And then finally, our alumni outreach program. This would be to acquire land. We would use our extensive network and ask for donations. If an alumni donates land or a tree, maybe a plaque could be offered in their name, or a bench at one of our park locations, or in any of our tree planting or forestry initiatives. Next, we can move on to our final slide, which will be just the overall conclusion and recommendations. We recommend using Second Nature to accredit offsets to offer the most seamless transition. As peer reviewed, so it would be other universities working directly with us and really giving us insight to what their programs have been using and what's been really working for them. And then from here, each of these 3 categories of projects have great potential to offset the university's carbon emissions, which would be the tree-based solutions, which is urban forestry and tree planting initiatives, our building-based solutions, which is the weatherization of homes for socially economic disadvantaged neighborhoods, and avoided land conversion which would be conserving plots of land in order to let their natural habitats just kind of work out. So, all right. So thank you again for joining us. And if there's any general questions, we could take them now. But that is all from the Investing Locally team. So thank you.
Thanks, Izzy. And great job, team. Very nice recovery from technical issues. I think that's an important professional skill for everybody to learn these days. So what we're going to do now is to move into breakout rooms. I'll open those up in a second. The breakout room that I'm going to open, everybody should be able to choose the room that they want to go into. But the breakout room will be for the team that just presented on localized offsets. We'll take probably about 20 minutes or so to have a conversation in those breakout rooms, and then come back together to do kind of a closing and a little bit of a wrap up. Anybody have any questions?
Maybe just one piece, Nick, for those who are not on the committee and who are joining us, you get to choose whatever you want to do, and you can probably bounce around if you'd like to as well, unless that's a problem.
Nope. Yeah, no, the room should be open for you to bounce back and forth. And for the breakout room, just for archival purposes, Izzy and Mel, you both have permission to record that room. So if you could just do that, so we have a documentation of what's going on. So I will open the rooms. The localized offsets team has been pre-selected for that space, but if there's anybody who can't get into that room, let me know who needs to be in that space.
Nick, I think I should be going in there, right?
Probably.
With me, Nick, I don't have the room.
Oh, this.
Yeah, me too, Nick.
Who's me too?
Don Herb.
Don Herb. Okay. Anybody else?
Me, Aaron.
Me, Michael.
Okay.
And Greg.
Are they not? They're just.
And Peter.
It's not showing up.
Yeah,
Nope.
there's no invitation to breakout rooms showing up.
You can see that there's no button for it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Me, Rebecca.
Rebecca.
Dave Hill, too.
Dave Hill.
That's because all the cool kids want to stay with us pricing carbon, folks.
I was going to try to go in that room too. Olga Crombie, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ryan, a nerdier sentence has never been uttered.
Fair enough.
Well, welcome to the world of Ryan McPherson.
Yeah.
Just following Tonga.
I'm just going to leave Tonga in here just to tear into Ryan the entire time.
Appreciate that. Much appreciated.
Nick, could you put me in the other room? It's Martha.
Yep, sure, Martha.
Martha wants out. I don't blame her.
Smart move, Martha. Very smart.
Okay. All right. So
I think we have our group here. It's up to Trisha what group she wants to be in, but if she wants to be in pricing carbon, Trisha, you are in the right place. If you want to be in offsets, just let us know.
I'll stay here. It sounds like an interesting one. Thank you.
Good choice, Trisha. Good choice.
The boss is in your group. Yeah, I'm not sure there is a choice.
We don't tell the other group, but we're the really cool kids in the group.
So I'm just hoping, for a general conversation, seeing if you have any specific questions. The committee members have all seen the report. Some of the folks who are guests obviously have not seen that yet. They'll be working later this week to wrap those pieces up and to get them back to UB Sustainability. But the hope was just to kind of close out the conversation from the semester that you've had a talk several times. And, if there are other kinds of pressing questions or things about where should this go from here, that might be a great time to talk about that as well.
Thanks, Nick.
And I'll bounce room to room. So,
Miss Pham, did you want to kick us off?
I do. So I myself am a guest, and I just want to say to all the students, thank you. That was great work. I really enjoyed the ability for you to condense something like that into 10 minutes is very well done. So again, back to what Nick says, it's definitely a skill set for you to take into the workplace. So I didn't get a chance to read your, I guess, draft recommendations, like the actual document. So if you've already answered this in there, then my apologies. But otherwise, when you guys were doing a lot of the environmental scans, like looking at other institutions and stuff like that, I'm wondering, was there any talks during your research about, I guess, some of the infrastructure that was already around? Like, so whether it was, the transportation side, I know somebody was saying, hey, maybe leverage and do more like bike sharing. And I'm assuming that was to commute from home to the campus, right? And I know some of the schools like ASU, et cetera, only because I've been down there, that city has a lot of biking infrastructures. There's like bike lanes, let's forget about the weather side, but there were things that made the commuter feel much safer on the roads. And so I'm just kind of wondering if there was any ones that you picked that were maybe more similar to Buffalo per se, in that, it's a very high car centric community, and those kind of things. And then I was kind of thinking the same around some of the, and I maybe it was the localized one, but just again talking about, or maybe it was this group, smart meters and stuff. Did any of the schools, if that is this group, talk about how maybe they funded the installation of the smart meters within their various buildings? And I will stop there.
Thank you for your question. So in terms of the smart meters, a lot of the universities utilize funding from their energy efficiency programs or through their carbon pricing. So that's kind of how they initiated that. They use that funding to do building upgrades.
Thank you, Nicole. As you can see, Ms. Pham is already angling for the money that's coming in from pricing carbon back into her budget for the meters. Very smart, savvy.
Oh, well done, Nicole. Well done. Drop me a line later for your gift card. Thank you.
Did anyone want to take the, I can't remember who was doing the mobility part of that, part of the report. Do you want to try to field Tonga's question from that angle? Who was handling transportation in your group? They're not here?
It was Zihan. Zihan was the one that did fleet vehicle analysis.
Okay.
So I'm sorry we can't provide more information.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Beth, did you have any questions, or does anyone else have questions?
You know what, I would just say I too enjoyed the report as well as this morning's presentation. I'm curious, in getting started, you've presented a bunch. I'm just curious, what do you see as, okay, here's your report. How do we get started? What do we start with first? And what would you recommend that, we prioritize up front and then move as more of a secondary thing?
I think overall, like a general idea of what we could do is trying to make sure that our first steps are something that will be easily accepted by the students and the faculty, because if steps are taken that they're going to start to resist it, like if they hear the word carbon tax, or like maybe the students have an additional fee they have to pay all of a sudden, because we get fee after fee every year. Just overall making sure that people get on board immediately, because then we'll have the best foot forward to then maybe push for more things that maybe might not get accepted at first, but later on, once people start to see, oh, this is actually a good thing, they'll be more willing to take on maybe something that might financially not impact, like help them right away, but in the long run could help them and help the planet overall.
Thank you, Sandra. That is great counsel. And maybe just to reiterate, I think trying to find a way to get that into your executive summary and the written report would be really helpful. Like the quick, easy wins and the resonance would be, it's really great. Thank you.
I don't mean to interrupt, but can I go to breakout room 1? It never brought me there.
You can,
Like
if Nick can teleport you there, yes. One other global question. So we had the pleasure, which you guys didn't, although I think it was recorded, so you may have had access to it. The Pricing Carbon group had a good conversation with many different institutions, including Yale. And one of the pieces, Brandon, I can't remember if it was you or Peter or someone else who had kind of brought this back afterwards and said, you know, it was a great question, like, what would you do in retrospect now knowing what you know? And one of his key kind of statements I thought really at least kind of blew me away. He said, you know, we probably would do more proxy pricing than we would have done actual pricing. And that got the group really thinking. So I'm not challenging your recommendation at all, but you have, you know, most of your recommendations are on direct carbon pricing. And then you have proxy pricing for, I think, mobility and a couple other things. How did you really, you know, what is the main overarching reason for why you came to that decision of having direct pricing as the main recommendation, with the exception of mobility and those other areas?
That's a really interesting point that I wish we had gotten to hear that from that person at Yale, a couple weeks ago. I'd be interested to know why they more of their reasoning behind that. But to answer your question, I've obviously first, 4 out of 6 like went with a carbon charge. But it was sort of, in reading more about it, there were large institutions with sort of decentralized decision making, and that was sort of what allowed, like, it sort of kept everybody accountable to the same standard. Like a proxy price, like from what sort of some of the reading, like there was just some more flexibility to it, and it didn't, it was like, when you have so many sort of different schools and departments and decision making centers, it kept people on the same track, from what we found. And I, again, kind of going back to this guy from Yale, I want to know, like, did they find that to be true with their proxy price? So it's an interesting point.
And to add to Chris's point, so most of the universities use proxy pricing for their new developments and use carbon charge for their existing infrastructure, so that, like, in future they won't be, like, they don't have to, like, charge or do any sort of new changes in the new infrastructure that will be built. So it's within the sustainability, like, it's built with the sustainability concept within it.
That's great. Thank you very much.
I like the notion, Chris, that you talked about large decentralized universities. I mean, that's very much so us. So seeing that comparison, I think is very helpful in reporting. And I didn't mean to interrupt, Ryan. I'm sorry. Were you going to ask a question? This is just more of an observation. It's interesting. I'm very intrigued by the travel agreements and establishing them with the airlines. And I want to go back and just take a look at the airlines that the university has been utilizing for the past several years, just to see where we're at. My sense is, I know we have some departments that love flying Southwest because bags fly for free and all of those different things. But what's interesting to me is that if they're not one of those carriers, oftentimes I think they look to the ticket price as being the cost. But I guess if those folks travel Southwest and then are hit with a carbon tax, the flight prices would be more in a line. So I'm very appreciative of that section of the report. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to make some movement.
Yeah, and Beth, I really like that as well. And I also love the what I term the no-fly zone, which I think
no-fly zone
creative with different military terms as well. But I really like that aspect, especially we have some people who fly to Philadelphia and then to Albany. And that's a tough one to justify from a carbon perspective. Beth, I actually have a question for you on that last one. Okay. Do we have the ability at the university for any department from a procurement standpoint to, if I want to fly JetBlue, I can just choose JetBlue, right? I don't have to go do a bid for a $250 ticket. are there things around that that could help us, or how does that work?
Yes. Yeah. So one of the, I think one of the business practices coming out of COVID, prior to COVID, individuals could book their own travel, and they still can today, I should say. But we've introduced this request type of step prior to travel taking place, where currently, there's an authorization escalation for being able to make trips. But our travel module allows for a request to happen through the actual Concur system. And what we could do is have it set so that particular airlines are the only airlines that are listed and made available for making reservations. So there's opportunities for us to point travelers in the right direction, which I think would be good, from a financial aspect.
Yeah, I thought that was a great recommendation from the group. Like, I'm sure there's many. I'll just mention one, and I think you guys had said this in a previous meeting, the work that JetBlue has done, for instance, right, on the ground, electrifying all of the things except the plane, which they're working on. So stuff like that for us to support that, but still within the bounds of our procurement process in the state of New York. The other thing I really appreciated was the recommendation to advocate at the federal level for more of that. I think the more we can hear from students that that's a wish of theirs or a desire for that, that helps us make the case to put that on our legislative agenda here at the university. Brandon, did you have I saw your mute button go off a little bit ago. Did you have a comment or a question?
Oh, I was just going to add a quick comment that in terms of this carbon charge versus the proxy price, to me, it seems like the carbon charge is going to be going to have more expansive and also subtler challenges at the same time. So I like the fact that you kind of focused there a little bit more, because I think that's where we're going to need a little bit more help and guidance in that. So I just appreciated that.
That's great. That's great. Any other comments or questions? I think the only other one that I had in my notes was on energy cap. I think there was a recommendation to make that public. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one of you presented on that. We actually did that several years back when we had a Lucid dashboard program. The challenge is that we didn't have anyone using it or utilizing it. And the other piece be interesting here, Tonga's perspective is, do we want all of that data to be public versus available to individuals for research and exploration, and if there are any safety issues around that? So I'd love to just kind of open that up and maybe get some thoughts around what the thinking is there. And I can't remember which one of you was on point for that part of the presentation.
Yes, that was me again. So my recommendation for that was mostly centered around allowing students and faculty to understand their energy use, and will also help them monitor their consumption habits, because that's a really important thing that consumption needs to be considered in order to reduce energy use. And having these the various energy usages posted online will allow people to monitor them a little easier. So there are a couple of platforms. I know ASU uses, I think it's Campus Metabolism or something like that. And they have it posted on their sustainability website. And I don't believe that there's any barriers to safety regarding them posting that. So I do think there's options available that are safe and also allow people to keep track of what they're doing and base it on individual buildings.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And I'd be interested in Tonga's input on this. I'm sorry if I misspoke. It's not really safety. The challenge sometimes is there's so much data there that it's hard to put into context. So people will grab some, make a general assumption that it's this, and they're missing 15 or 20 different factors. And then there's an article written about it that's completely incorrect, or at least at best misleading, not intentionally, just based on that. So it's really how we contextualize that data. But Tonga, I don't know if you had any other thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, we always kind of struggle with the, getting information out there, and exactly what Ryan says. There always needs to be context versus just kind of like a data dump, right? So we've struggled with that. And I think all institutions or even corporations kind of struggle with that, right? So that's something that, if you're doing follow-on work, I think that would be a nice to kind of do a deeper dive on that one, like the cost benefits of that. And back to the cost benefits, it's just that, I mean, yeah, there's a litany of platforms out there that's being marketed, and and it's always around that same messaging, right? It's like, oh, you get this data out, everybody will change their behavior. Wouldn't that be great? Then probably we wouldn't be in the situation that we are today as a society. So I think it's more of that. I mean, I don't think it's just selection of the tools, but what's the real likelihood of adoption and usage of that tool? And then is it affordable, right? I mean, does it make sense to kind of plunk down that $15,000 every year for the membership or the user fee or SaaS, whatever it is, against what's the likelihood of it's really being used, coupled with the context, and how do we drive that change, right? A lot of people often use data as the impetus to make change, but is that really the case? I mean, we've been doing this for what, 3-4 decades now, and there's plenty of data. There's no lack of data, yet as a society, behaviorally, we've changed nothing. So I kind of wonder, is there another way of looking at these things about getting behavioral change and adoption, other than just, hey, if you put the data, then everybody will conform, which I put out there as a potentially not as an effective avenue.
That's really helpful, Tonga. I couldn't agree more. And I think, the work that you all did is another area of behavior change, right? It's just pain or pleasure, I guess, because it's pricing, right? So we either incentivize you or we penalize you. Mark Coldren is running another of our UBs 10 and 10 that's really on this topic. It's about behavior change. So it's an interesting piece to kind of look at that. And the research shows that it's not just information that gets people to change. It's how hard do I think it will be to change is one factor. And the other factor is what will my peers think of me as social creatures, unfortunately, right? It's not just the education.
I think in terms of data, am I audible?
You're good.
In terms of like data, like you are saying, like we have like ton of data regarding energy consumptions and other things. So they started like having a comprehensible energy reports that are easy to read for everyone, like 1 or 2 page reports that they are like energy bills that the different departments get from the facility department. So like something concise and easy to read would be like a good starting point here. Like every decision maker is not technically sound how to read that data, like in what it is meant for. So having that thing what might be helpful.
I guess my question is, what are the true benefits? Because it's a lot of work behind the scenes to even get that data up into any database, right? And so if say my energy engineer is doing that, he or she is not doing something else. And is there value? Like, are people really reading this data? I guess is my next question, versus just putting it up as, we're transparent, here's all the data for every single building. Is there value in going down that avenue to say, this is an approach we really should take because we see, a benefit of doing something like that? I guess that's more of my questioning.
And you can see that data right now on a building-wide basis on the UB Climate Action page, right? So you can visually click on a building and get the overall aggregate. That's the transaction cost is moderate on that one. It's just a drill down further that's more challenging. I'm going to send it back to Nick because I know we're on time.
Yeah, so I do know a number of people on the committees emailed and said that they had kind of a hard stop at 9 o'clock. So I do want to thank them for coming this morning and hearing the presentations of both of the teams. I always apologize that the conversations in both rooms were fantastic, and I think hearing a lot of great feedback. But I do also want to really publicly say about the students that at the beginning of this semester, these topics were something that were really new to both of the teams. And I think one of the really remarkable thing that they've done is to go from zero to trying to summarize this information and give recommendations in one semester. And I'm very hopeful, that both of the working groups, will use this information and feedback and the work that they have carrying forward, because I think there's a lot of heart in the work that they've done, and a lot of, for the students who are graduating, hope that their alma mater, will take on some of these issues and take it to heart. So I just really want to thank them publicly. I know some of you have to drop off because I think they've done a lot of great work this semester. I do, however, need to keep the students on for a couple minutes because I want to talk about wrapping some things up. And certainly anybody who is from the committees who wants to stay, you're more than welcome to do that if there are other pieces of the conversation that you wanted to have. But for those of you who had the hard stop at 9 o'clock, thank you very much for coming this morning. I personally really appreciate all of the feedback you've given over the course of the semester.
Nick, just super quick too, there were a lot of committee members for whom this information was new as well. So the students going through that process and sharing with us was really helpful on our side as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Great work.
Yep.
All right, let's see. So still have some folks on, which is great. I mean, we can kind of continue the conversations. I don't know if I reopen the rooms or anything like that. I think I'll just keep it here because it doesn't look like we have enough for both teams. So I have comments back now on both reports. I'm going through those today and trying to pull it together. I think I can speak for Ryan and Derek in saying that there aren't any showstoppers in the reports. Most of it is about clarity, about trying to punch up some of the things. In some cases, you had really great findings that sort of got lost in the middle of the report, and those things need to be elevated. As Ryan and Derek have both said to me, these reports are going to be very helpful in terms of continuing these conversations, but also elevating them to higher levels of the university administration. So we want to make sure that these are reflective of all the hard work that you've done this semester. I'm planning to, once I've gone through the comments I got yesterday, I'm going to send those to both of the teams, and then you can self-organize as a group to figure out when it's best, when you're able to pull those things together. I do think, obviously we don't want this to drag out for a long time. Based on the comments I've seen, I don't see any reason, and this isn't a faculty member saying this, I don't see any reason why you can't have this done, by the end of the week. I actually, as a human, also think, there isn't too much work there to wrap these pieces up. So I'll leave it though to the teams to give me a deadline by when you're going to send stuff back. And once I have those, I think just keeping it in a Word document, frankly, at this point to clean it up will be helpful. And we can transmit those 2 Word documents to Derek and Ryan to continue the conversations with the committees, if that makes sense.
Nick, can I just add in, I thought the reports were, the verbal presentations you just gave, pitches, et cetera, I thought they were great. They were, you could really see the evolution that you guys have made through this. And so just to reinforce and echo Nick's comments there, thought that was great. I think in the reports themselves, as Nick has said, there's, I think, some tightening that can occur, and really going back, you were forced to really kernelize for the verbal presentations, right? Because there's a certain time limit on that. And I think if you take some of that mentality going into the next part of the draft review in the written work, you'll be able to really tighten that up. It's always hard writing by committee too. It's a recipe for disaster sometimes, but it's what we all need to do. So thinking about, trying to take a fresh set of eyes to it too, and reading it through as one person, making sure you have kind of that consistency of message. So, and then Rachel, I just wanted to close on more of a funny aspect. I am now going to call NYSERDA NY-CERTA because I think it sounds so much more fun and it makes them seem so much more fun than they probably are. But thank you for that. That made my day.
What is it usually pronounced?
That's all good. I'm using yours.
Oh,
It's
okay.
much better.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And just for our group, I kind of alluded to this in what I was talking about that one time about action steps, but if you could also put a lens on like a temporal part of what action steps, like what order we should go in, that would help corral my committee into like moving things forward. So if you throw like 10 recommendations at us, it's going to be chaos. But if you say, hey, start here and here's where you should end, that might help guide some of our work. So just if you can add that in, that'd be fantastic.
Derek, that's great. Beth asked the same thing of the carbon pricing group to like, what's your number one recommendation first out of the gate, and giving us more of a roadmap.
I made note of what we were asked to write in the executive summary. So
yeah, all good.
And I would say too, listening to the recording and some of the feedback that you had here as you're doing the edits, because I think there's certainly, I think I see some of you taking notes to the side of the Zoom camera, but just making sure that you picked up on some of the comments, because there were some guests, I think, in both rooms who had some additional perspectives. Like Greg, for instance, in the other room, was talking about things or small modifications that might be helpful, and those would be nice to capture in the final report, because it'll make it even more useful and even more likely that it'll get elevated at the university.
Yeah. Nick, one structural question I have for the offset group, just because I wasn't in that, I just wanted to make sure I'm really not good at math, so I am pretty confident I am not getting this, but in your recommendations where you list out the 3 basic pieces and what they each could offset to get to your 15%, you use this language that within 5 years, we will get up to that. I just want to make sure you know that overarching 15% is on an annualized basis. So you need to hit that 15,000 or whatever the units were of that 15% every year, not totality of 5 years to get to that. So I probably misperceived what you were communicating, but I just want to make sure that you're perceiving that in the way in which we count carbon here at UV. I'm pretty confident you are, but I just wanted to verify that. And maybe in the report, just tightening up some of the language around what you mean by over 5 years. Does it mean at the end of 5 years you will get to the place where we're doing 15%, we're hitting the 15% totality? And if that's true, then just clarify that with the language. Any questions on that from the offset group? I don't know if I'm being clear.
No, I know what you're saying. I'll fix it.
Thanks, Isabel.
Yep.
Thanks, Angelina.
Maybe at this point, I can just keep the students on for a couple more minutes and just chat with them. I appreciate everybody else for sticking around here. There's just a couple other sort of logistical things we need to wrap up in addition to the reports. Yep.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Derek. Or is it just us now? Okay, cool. I'm not going to say anything weird or nefarious or anything like that. So very nice work today on the presentations. They have come leaps and bounds improvements since last week, and so I think you should feel very happy with where those got to. And like hats off to the localized offsets team for overcoming a technical challenge and doing it pretty seamlessly, which was great to see. So yeah, it was good. So in terms of the final reports, like I said, so nobody else is on the call, right? Okay. I got comments from the committees yesterday at about 4:30 p.m. So I want to go through those things and align my comments with what they have and then send those out to you guys to wrap things up. I don't think it's going to take a lot of work to wrap it up. When I say that, I think it'll take a couple of hours to wrap it up, but it's probably something where you need to have a smaller team just focus in, perhaps from each of the sub teams, to make it happen. But I will leave that up to you as as groups to figure out how you want to do that and when you think you'll be able to wrap it up by, because I know you have other final exams and other kinds of things going on this week. In addition to wrapping up the report, I think Izzy and Mel, you both recorded the last session, maybe,
Yeah.
or at least Izzy did.
Yeah.
Can you just make sure I get a copy of that, and I'll put it on or on Panopto so you can use that as part of the editing.
Okay.
Third thing, so I need everybody who is on the call to finish updating their hours to the timesheet. Some of you haven't done that for quite literally weeks to months. So, go back through and look at when you had meetings for your team scheduled, look at your calendars, things like that, and try to pull it together. I just want you to have that as a reflective exercise so that you start to develop a way to understand how long certain tasks might take versus what the actual reality is. It's not something that I'm going to be using for grading, but it is something that I want you to go through and do because I think it's an important professional skill. The fourth and final thing is that I'm going to send out the peer-to-peer evaluations. And again, I put those on Google Forms before, and I was asking you to give feedback about each of your team members. I'd like you to go through, even if you have very little to say, and give feedback to all of the members of your larger team. And this time for the evaluations, I would appreciate it if you don't just say, this sub team or things like that. Try to go through and, remember the conversations and the work that you had with each group and fill it out for each team member. That doesn't mean you need to write, Tolstoy's War and Peace, about each person. If you really didn't work with someone that much, just base it on what interactions you did have. But for your sub team members, I would hope that you would give more detailed feedback on their performance. I am going to use that information, and that was in the syllabus in terms of aligning, final grades for the class. Okay. So 4 things, right? Well, I guess 3 things. Izzy, you have a 4th thing. So the 3 things are, you'll get the comments on the report later today when I'm done being in 26 consecutive meetings. The second piece is get your hours updated. And the last piece is your peer-to-peer evaluations. And when those things are done, I think we're all wrapped up for this class. Okay. I do really want to say, this, this class was designed and intended to be a much more of an in-person experience because it always is easier to at least kick off projects working with other team members. When do I want them updated by? Ola, it would be great if those were done by the end of the week, as you suggested in your email. So this class was very much designed and intended to, for us to be working together in the same spaces and to be able to have those kinds of feedback. That said, I think that you should pat yourselves on the back because you did an admirable job this semester, even given the circumstances of working online. I will say, for many of the projects I work on as a researcher, and doing consulting work, I don't meet some of the people I work with ever in person. So in some ways, having this experience where you have to pull a project together as a team while working online is probably a good simulation for what work will be like in the future. But the thing I'm most impressed about from your teams is that at the beginning of this semester to a person, no one here really felt that they were experts in either putting a price on pollution or working on localized offsets. And going from 0, to what you have in the final report over 15 weeks while working through some of these different skills and trying to work out ways of working together, I think is pretty remarkable. So when you take a moment to reflect on the class, give yourself a little bit of self-love and say, we actually accomplished quite a bit this semester. And Ryan and Derek, as an aside, always in public presentations when people tell you, oh, you did a great job with the presentations and things like that, you always, at least I am, maybe I'm just paranoid. I'm always skeptical, when people give me that kind of feedback on stuff. But I will say that separate from talking to Derek and Ryan in these settings, they've also said to me personally that they really appreciate this. The committees really appreciate this work. And I think it's going to be really, really helpful for them moving forward because in many ways, you're giving them the framework or the grounding to get these processes going. So if you are graduating this semester, this will be something nice for your portfolio, but this will also be something nice that you're kind of gifting back to your alma mater and hoping that they will continue to push down this path towards carbon neutrality. So I'll send the reports out. I ask everybody to update their hours by the end of the week, and I'll send the link for the peer-to-peer evaluations. If everybody can finish those things up, I think that'll conclude sort of the deliverables for the class. Last but not least, I just want to say thank you to you all this semester. Thank you, for students who are not in architecture and planning. Doing these kind of group work studio projects can be, frankly, a little bit scary or intimidating. And I think everybody kind of stepped up and figured out ways to work with their team members this semester. And I really appreciate that because really without all of you in the class, figuring out ways to work together, this never would have happened. And so, I really do hope, I know that Susan sent an email out to some of you for like a graduation type thing on Saturday. Is that right? If you're in town or even if you're not graduating on Saturday, if you want to come by, and I think we're getting coffee and like Paula's Donuts. I know very high end kind of things. But, it would be nice to see folks in person. If you're not on campus, and I know some of you are in different states and different locations and things like that, please do keep in touch, and let me know how things are going. And let me know if you use some of this work, certainly for your future career paths. Okay. Yep, Sandra.
We didn't agree on when you wanted the report actually submitted officially. I personally want it done as soon as possible when people have the time, because I'm just ready to go on break.
So I'm not going to tell you a day and time. I think I'll try to get these things out to you by the end of the day. Like I said, like 4:45 yesterday is when I finally got some comments from Ryan on stuff. So I'll send it to you today after I have a chance to go through and process it and make sure everything is kind of in alignment. But it's up to your teams to determine when you want to turn that in. Obviously, I need to assign grades and stuff for the class, so please don't, do it after, after this semester is truly ended. Just come up with something reasonable. But I also know that people still have a lot of stuff due this week, so Sandra, while you may want to get it done as soon as possible, it may not be possible for everybody's schedules right now.
I totally understand that.
Cool. All right, I'm sort of melancholy about signing off here, so I'll do it quick. But thank you all for the semester. I really appreciate the opportunity, and be on the lookout for my emails. Okay.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you. It was great work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.